Sarah struggled with severe agoraphobia. For years, she was unable to leave her house, even to sit in her backyard without experiencing intense anxiety and panic. Yet, she was determined to get better and started attending therapy. At first, progress was slow, and exposure therapy was difficult for Sarah. She would occasionally have panic attacks during the exposures and sometimes felt like she was taking, 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. But she didn't give up. She kept pushing herself and gradually increasing the difficulty of the exposures. And she was learning new coping strategies along the way. Now, Sarah was working on grocery shopping exposures. These exposures were especially challenging for her, and she often started panicking on the way there, even before making it to the store. But something amazing happened. Sarah, despite believing that she would panic again, completed an exposure at the grocery store without having a panic attack. This was monumental for her. She sent me a picture of herself that day, smiling ear to ear, holding a watermelon to show me what she had accomplished. It was a victory after a lot of setbacks, and it was a pivotal moment in her recovery. She was finally starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel and understand how to retrain her brain. She also verbalized the next session that she was committed to getting better, no matter what happened during her exposures. Now, as is often the case with conditions like these, whether you're working on agoraphobia or panic or OCD or social anxiety, progress is not always linear. Sarah would have occasional bad days where her anxiety and panic returned. It was frustrating, but she reminded herself that this was part of the process and that the journey to recovery is just not a straight line. Joseph Doux, a neuroscientist and the author of Anxious, Using the Brain to Understand and Treat Fear and Anxiety, describes these occasional challenging exposures when panic occurs as experiences that strengthen the learning process. You're creating new neuropathways that override the old, fearful neuro network in your brain. And sometimes the brain just jumps on the wrong pathway and onto that old, fearful network. It doesn't mean that you've lost ground. It just happens on occasion. And occasionally having a panic attack during an exposure has been shown to increase the overall effectiveness, and it gives you opportunities to learn that you can tolerate and cope with those situations. Ultimately, I encourage you to challenge yourself at all levels of difficulty in your exposures. Now, if you're just starting out, I suggest beginning with an easy exposure that you know you can complete. But as you get going and commit to doing exposure work, I recommend daily practice in as many different scenarios and difficulties as you can create. And remember that fear generalizes or spreads to similar situations, but exposures and safety learning does not do a great job at generalizing. What that means is that if you're afraid of riding in an elevator and your fear will spread to all elevators, and if you do exposures on just one elevator, it only works on that one elevator. So you have to compensate for that by switching it up, varying exposures, practicing your exposures on all different kinds of elevators, just to keep your brain surprised and learning. Now, if you're working on driving exposures, you want to drive down different streets and different routes at different times of the day, different weather conditions, alone or with other people, and even drive in different cars if that's possible for you. Mixing it up is one way to help those exposures become more effective. Let me just mention that I encourage you to practice daily, but there's no perfection here, and sometimes life just gets in the way. Just think of making a commitment of doing what you can with an attitude of determination to do what you have to do to continue to make progress. Sarah continued to work on her recovery, and today she's able to live a much more fulfilling life. She has a job, she travels, goes out to dinner and the movie with friends. She's still working on it, but she is much further along than she ever thought possible. Now, the takeaway from Sarah's story is that progress is not linear, and that's okay. It takes time, takes patience, consistent practice to make progress. And if you're struggling with agoraphobia or an anxiety disorder or OCD, keep challenging yourself. Occasional setbacks are part of the normal process. I left you a few links to some resources to help you with panic and agoraphobia below, or go to pagepradkogut.com for more information. Now, in this next video, I explain how to go about making your exposures as effective as possible. Stay strong, know that you're not alone. Until next time, I'll see you in session. Take care. Bye-bye.